How did religions come into being? Have you ever asked yourself whether religions might have been created by a particular community or center of power to gather people around a single belief, to group them, and to guide or control them? I wonder, does everyone think about these questions? We are born knowing nothing. We don't choose the world, life, right or wrong. We are introduced to what is shown to us. Which language we speak, which belief we grow up with, what is considered a sin or a virtue. We accept all of this as something already prepared. Then we adapt to the society we grow up in. And that adaptation is often more obligation than choice. Because humans want to be accepted, they fear being excluded, being alone. So is this belief truly a path we choose? Or is it simply a direction taught to us and accepted without question? If religion exists to guide people toward the right path, why is there so much war, hatred, and violence in the world? Why do people kill one another in the name of God? Why do those who believe in the same God become enemies? Perhaps the problem is not belief itself, but how, and for what purpose, humans use it. Perhaps religion was created for goodness, but over time it turned into a tool to divide and control people. Asking these questions is not a sin, nor is it a lack of faith. It is simply thinking. And perhaps the truth is hidden within these very questions. Before we dive deeper into our topic, let us first take a general look at the creation of humanity. Humans, as thinking beings, are distinguished from all other living creatures, and the choices we make, the decisions we take in life, are, in fact, products of our thoughts. So let us think. There are sometimes serious contradictions between history and religion. For example, history shows that the earliest human societies were simple and primitive in structure. Humans had not yet invented writing, there was no technology, and they lived only with what they had learned in order to survive. From the first discovery of fire and tools to the invention of writing, the emergence of culture, and the rise of cities, thousands of years passed. However, as we know from religious sources, the first human, Adam, knew everything because it was taught to him by God. This raises a question. If Adam knew everything, why do archaeological findings, rock carvings, and traces of primitive societies contradict this claim? In those findings, humans are depicted as beings living primitive, simple lives. Religious scholars explain this issue in the following way. Adam learned everything in heaven. Heaven is a realm different from the earth, and what was learned there does not immediately manifest on earth. In other words, Adam's knowledge was symbolic or occurred in a divine realm, while human society on earth passed through its own stages of development, learning gradually and eventually reaching its current level. Thus, we must reflect on this. Humanity has progressed through a gradual path of development in knowledge and technology, while religion explains this process from a divine perspective. At times, differences emerge between history and religion. Understanding these differences helps us see both historical and religious perspectives more deeply and more objectively. Polytheism and monotheism. The history of humanity and society throughout history. Human thought has encountered two major concepts of belief, polytheism and monotheism. Polytheism is a belief system that was widespread in ancient civilizations. In cultures such as ancient Egypt, Greece, Rome, and Mesopotamia, people believed in multiple gods, one responsible for war, another for fertility, one symbolizing love and compassion, another representing anger and punishment. These gods resembled humans. They had emotions. They felt joy, anger, jealousy, and mercy. Polytheism functioned as both an explanatory and a governing system for societies. It helped explain natural phenomena, fate, and the rules of life. Monotheism, on the other hand, is based on belief in a single God. In this system, one supreme being governs the entire universe, establishes laws, and guides humanity along the right path. Judaism, Christianity, and Islam are examples of monotheistic religions. Monotheism regulates human morality, social order, and collective behavior in a more unified and systematic way. Historically, these two concepts are closely linked to how societies developed and were governed. Both models offer people a moral framework and a way of life, but they do so through different paths. Polytheism symbolizes different aspects of society through multiple gods, while monotheism strengthens unity and order by centering society around a single divine authority. Here is an interesting point. These concepts are not only historical, they are also reflected in modern societies. People still navigate between different beliefs and ideas. Sometimes they live with multiple value systems at once, much like polytheism. Other times, they unite around a single belief or ideology, resembling monotheism. So how did the concept of religion emerge? Let's go back a little, far back, to the very beginning, to a time before history was written, when the world was wild and mysterious. Imagine you are a human living tens of thousands of years ago. There are no books, no science, and none of the religions we know today. To you, the world is made up of dark forests, gigantic animals, and an endless sky stretching above. Everything begins one evening as you sit at the mouth of your cave, staring up at the sky. Suddenly, lightning flashes. Thunder roars. Terrified, you run deeper into the cave. But a question forms in your mind. Who did this? And why? You know nothing about physics or electricity. To you, that sound isn't just noise, it is anger. You believe there must be someone greater, stronger than you in the sky, and that being is angry with you. This is how the first spark of religion is born, the human need to give meaning to the unknown. Then one day, you lose your closest friend, your hunting companion. You see that he no longer breathes, no longer moves. But that night, you dream of him. He talks to you. He smiles. When you wake up, you wonder, his body is here, so who was the one I saw in my dream? And so, you discover the idea of the soul, something separate from the body. You conclude that when a human dies, an invisible part leaves and goes somewhere else. You soften the cold fear of death with the hope of an other world. As you walk through the forest and sit beneath a tree, listening to the whisper of the wind, you feel as if the tree itself is alive, as if it has a spirit. The flowing river, the rising sun, everything feels like a miracle. You are no longer alone. The world around you is filled with spirits. To please them, you dance. You offer your best hunt as a sacrifice, hoping they won't harm you and will grant you abundance. Time passes, and you realize that surviving alone is difficult. You gather with your tribe. You need something to unite you. Someone says, "Our common ancestor is this mighty eagle." The eagle becomes your totem. Because you all respect the eagle, you begin to respect one another as well. Religion is no longer just fear. It becomes a bond that holds you together, a shared identity, a family tie. One day, someone steps forward and says, "I can speak to the spirits." He becomes the shaman. He prepares medicine from herbs. When sickness strikes, he beats the drum to drive the spirits away. You believe him, because in this harsh world, you are searching for something solid to hold on to. Perhaps the most fascinating part is this. Long before you fully learned how to farm wheat or build proper houses, you and thousands of others came together to construct massive stone temples. Because feeding your stomach was important, but feeding your soul, feeling close to that great power, was just as essential. This is how religion was born, my friend. From humanity's awe in the face of nature, from the spiritual pain caused by death, and from the sincere, simple answers given to the question, who are we? Religion is not merely a set of rules. It is the story of humanity's thousands of years-long search for meaning. I know, you might think that everything I've said so far sounds like nothing more than a legend. But let me take you behind the scenes and show you the unshakable truths scientists have uncovered from beneath the ground and from within the human mind. Behind every word of this story lie thousands of years of evidence. It all begins around 60,000 years ago, in the Shanidar Cave in northern Iraq. During excavations in the 1950s, a Neanderthal grave was discovered there. In 1960, scientists proved that flowers had been deliberately placed around the body. This was the earliest known burial ritual in history. In other words, even before modern humans, Homo sapiens, had fully emerged, the first seeds of religion, the act of giving meaning to death, had already begun to sprout. Let's move forward a little, to 30,000 to 10,000 BCE. If we look at the Lascaux Cave in France, we see walls covered with animal paintings. This is not mere art. Discovered in 1940, this site is considered a center of Paleolithic religion. People believed that by drawing an animal, they could gain power over its spirit. This was the first religious practice in history known as hunting magic. But the biggest shock came in 1994. German archaeologist Klaus Schmidt discovered Göbekli Tepe in Turkey. This site dates back to 10,000 to 9,000 BCE, roughly 12,000 years ago. Before this discovery, we believed that religion emerged after agriculture. But Göbekli Tepe proved the opposite. Humans built massive temples while they were still hunter-gatherers, before farming even existed. This was the first concrete evidence that religion was a driving force behind the birth of civilization, not a byproduct of it. Then the world began to change. Around 3500 BCE, the first writing appeared in Sumer, and for the first time, we could read religions. The names of gods were recorded. By 2000 BCE, in Mesopotamia, the first seeds of monotheism began to take shape through the story of the prophet Abraham. But what about sociological proof? In the 1990s, British anthropologist Robin Dunbar demonstrated that the human brain can maintain stable relationships with a maximum of about 150 people. Yet by 3000 BCE, cities like Uruk already had populations in the thousands. Scientists concluded that the only force capable of holding together such large groups of strangers was a shared fear and belief, religion. Without it, great armies and powerful states would never have formed. The emergence of religion is not just a story. It is a struggle for survival that began with flowers placed in a grave 60,000 years ago, was carved into massive stones at Göbekli Tepe 12,000 years ago, and was formalized into written laws 5,000 years ago. Science tells us that we were destined to believe, because without belief, we could never have built a world this vast. After those first hidden drawings made on cave walls and the lonely flowers placed on graves, humanity seemed to awaken from a long sleep. Imagine that those small groups who had knelt before nature for thousands of years now moved down to riverbanks, learned to cultivate the land, and, most importantly, learn how to build cities. But there is a problem. How do you keep thousands of people together? How do you make them believe in the same thing at the same time? This need triggered that magnificent transition in the history of religions, the period of the birth of civilization and the pantheon of gods. Cities in the shadow of the temple. How did religion turn into the state? Everything began around 4000 BCE in the fertile lands of Mesopotamia. People no longer needed only spirits, they needed great administrators. In the 1920s, when archaeologist Leonard Woolley excavated the ancient city of Ur, he discovered a truth that changed the course of history. At the center of the city stood not houses, but a gigantic temple, a ziggurat. This meant that the city was built around the god. Religion had stepped out of the corner of the cave and taken its seat at the very center of society, on the main platform. During this period, gods began to become human. In science, this is called anthropomorphism. For example, in Sumerian written documents dating to 3000 BCE, the world's first examples of writing, gods already formed families, became angry, and governed cities like humans. The storm god Enlil or the wisdom god Enki were no longer merely forces of nature. They were bureaucrats of the heavens. People believed that in order to maintain order on earth, there had to be an order in the sky as well, a pantheon. If we look a bit westward, toward the banks of the Nile, we see how religion turned into political power with the unification of Egypt around 3100 BCE. For the Egyptians, God was not distant. God was the pharaoh sitting on the throne. The hieroglyphs deciphered in 1822 by Jean-François Champollion proved that Egyptian religion, such as beliefs in Ra or Osiris, was not merely a belief system, but also an economic one. The people gave their produce to the god, that is, to the pharaoh's granaries, so that the god would raise the sun and flood the Nile. Religion had become history's first tax system and prosecutorial authority. The most striking aspect of this era was the emergence of the priestly class. No longer could everyone pray on their own. Intermediaries appeared between God and humans. Temple records dating to 2500 BCE show that priests observed the stars, created calendars, and foretold the future. This was the first marriage of science and religion. Astronomy and mathematics emerged precisely from the need to understand this pantheon of gods. Finally, the sociologist's big gods theory is confirmed here. As cities grew larger, for example, Uruk or Memphis with populations of 50,000 to 100,000, it became impossible for people to know one another. Religion filled this gap. People believed, if I deceive this stranger, the god Shamash, the god of justice, will punish me. In this way, religion broke tribal bonds and became the first global moral system that united strangers under a single law. The frightened cave dweller from the first part was no longer there. In his place stood an organized civilization that built massive pyramids, calculated the stars, and clothed its gods in golden statues. The gods were no longer the spirits of caves. They had become the unshakable rulers of heaven and earth. After civilizations flourished and the gods moved into palaces, humanity reached its sharpest turning point. The question arose, are there many gods, or is the Creator one? This was not merely a change in belief, but a revolution that redrew both the political and spiritual map of the world. Imagine the world between 2000 to 1500 BCE. Everywhere, a different god is prayed to for every event. In Egypt, sacrifices are offered to Ra for the sun. In Babylonia, to Shamash for justice. But this complexity creates a kind of exhaustion in the human mind. If the universe operates within an order, why are there so many rulers? The first major challenge to this idea came from Egypt around 1350 BCE. Pharaoh Amenhotep IV, Akhenaten, abolished all gods and ordered worship of only Aten, the sun disk. This was the first known state-level attempt at monotheism in history. Although the old gods returned after his death, the idea of the One was already in the air. It was precisely during these periods that a man emerged from the city of Ur in Mesopotamia, the prophet Abraham, who completely changed the course of humanity. Rejecting idols and multiple gods, he turned toward a single God who was invisible, without form, and the creator of everything. The Dead Sea Scrolls, discovered in the 19th century, and ancient Hebrew texts prove that with Judaism, around 1300 BCE, religion transformed from devotion to a statue into a covenant, an agreement between God and humanity. God was no longer a statue inside a temple, but it will present everywhere. Time passed, and in the 1st century CE, during one of the most fragmented periods of the Roman Empire, Christianity was born. The message brought by Jesus removed religion from ethnic boundaries and spread it to all of humanity. Religion was no longer based solely on laws, but on compassion and love. Although Rome initially banned this religion, it was forced to accept it in 313 CE with the Edict of Milan, because monotheism was the only ideological glue capable of holding together a collapsing empire. And finally, that magnificent call that began in the month of Ramadan in 610 CE, in the cave of Hira near Mecca. Read. With the arrival of Islam, monotheism found its clearest and sharpest form, Tawhid. Islam did not bring only a belief. It established an entire civilizational system that united science, law, and social justice. The Quranic principle, there is no God but Allah, freed humanity from idols and from servitude to humans, placing it face to face directly with the Creator. From a sociological perspective, this transition is remarkably logical. Societies had moved beyond being local and had become global empires. An empire needed one law, one ruler, and naturally, one God. The concepts of one book and one God became the highest peak of humanity's intellectual development. Do you see? This path, which began with fear etched onto cave walls, was refined over millennia into a light written in books, shaped by philosophy, and guiding billions of people toward the same direction and the same purpose. This is not only the story of religion, but the story of humanity's spiritual evolution. From taught belief to chosen understanding, everything begins with that crucial question: do we truly choose, or do we simply live what is given to us? Sociology tells us that if you had been born today in a different geography, your language, your prayers, and even the rules you call right would be different. What we call obligation is, in fact, an ancient defense mechanism of the human brain. Because tens of thousands of years ago, opposing the belief of the tribe meant being left alone in the wilderness and dying. That fear of being excluded within you is actually a survival instinct etched into our genes. But today, we are no longer in that cave. So the question now is this: is the belief you inherited a genuine spiritual need, or simply an old burden you carry on your shoulders? Here you touch the most painful point. If religion is for goodness, why is bloodshed in the name of God? Let's turn the dusty pages of history. Those massive empires, ziggurats, and armies we see prove one thing. Religion is the most powerful energy capable of mobilizing people toward a common purpose. From the day politicians and centers of power discovered this energy, they have used it as a weapon. Convincing a soldier to die for land is difficult, but when you tell him, this is a divine duty, he comes to see death as an honor. So the problem is not belief itself, but that never-ending hunger for power within humans. Religion has been the most sacred armor worn to conceal this ambition. Then where do we place that contradiction between the story of Adam and archaeological findings? The truth lies precisely within this difference. Religion explains who we are and why we are here through symbols and a divine language. Science proves how we developed through bones and stones. The path from that lonely flower in Shanidar Cave to the massive pillars of Göbekli Tepe is, in fact, the answer to the questions you ask. Humans have always searched for meaning. First, they knelt in fear of lightning. Then they moved gods into palaces. Finally, they took refuge in a single creator. This is the story of humanity's transition from childhood to maturity. Now let's return to today. As you said, asking these questions is not a sin. On the contrary, it is the path to true faith. Because an unquestioned belief is merely a habit, but a belief that is questioned and then accepted becomes your truth. We are leaving behind the era of blind obedience. Today, religion should cease to be a tool for governing society and instead become a harbor of peace built within the individual's inner world. In the end, we see that the history of religion is actually the history of our search for ourselves. For thousands of years, humanity has asked the same question: who am I? Sometimes we sought the answer by looking at a totem, sometimes at a star, sometimes at a book. The questions you ask today are the latest and brightest, link in that chain stretching back tens of thousands of years. Remember, truth is not found in answers handed to you ready-made, but in the questions you dare to ask. If you enjoyed the content, you can support our future research by liking the video, subscribing to the channel, and sharing your thoughts in the comments. Truth is the greatest reward for questioning minds. See you in the next video.